Are we capturing already? Good morning. My name is David Torres. I'll be doing the introductions throughout the day in this auditorium. We'll just go ahead and get started right away. I'm going to introduce Mr. David Shearer. He's an accomplished businessman and a government official. He's gone from CEO to CIO. I'm sorry? Test. Can you hear me?
I'm not sure. It hears me.
This is all you?
No, I don't control this thing at all. I have never actually really messed with this.
So where's the gain on this mic?
These folks microphone. Where's that actually running to?
It's running right into this one.
Okay. So I can turn it up here and keep speaking so I actually hear it.
Test. Test. There we go. Sorry about that. Good morning. I'm going to start over. My name is David Torres. I'll be performing the introductions in this auditorium for most of the day. We're going to get right into it since we're running a few minutes behind. I'm going to introduce Mr. David Shearer. He's an accomplished businessman and government official. He's been in positions from CEOs to CIOs. And so without further ado, Mr. David Shearer.
Thanks, everybody. So good morning. I'm the Executive Director for IC Squared, recently replaced Tor Tipton, and so I'm fresh off of that transition, and I think he may be roaming around here at some point today, so we may have an opportunity to bump into him. I wanted to kind of spend some time, louder. I wanted to spend some time talking about finding common ground within the industry and beyond. So I'm going to cover a little bit of an update regarding what's happening with ISC Squared, and then kind of take off on some of the concepts that Kevin talked about just in the plenary session, and see if we can't drive it home. I mean, one of the key things is that you see partnerships that are developing within the industry that a few short years ago you wouldn't have envisioned, and that's a really, really healthy thing. And I think one of the other things I'm going to tell you is I'm not going to go on and go on and on about how great ISC Squared is, right? There are lots of people, there are lots of games in town. You know, we have things we need to improve upon. We think we're good at some things. We need to get better at others. So it's not just going to be a spiel about all the great things we're doing. It'll talk about some other opportunities that we have for collaboration. You know, so it's great to be here at BSides. Kudos to our chapter and BSides for putting this event together. We've got roughly, I think, 1,000 members here in the Tampa area. Almost 3,200 in the state, and our chapters are growing, so that's good. Florida, we have a good representation there as ISC Squared, but there's also a lot of other great information security and cyber organizations and talent within the region as well. So we're proud that our headquarters is here in Clearwater, but we are an international organization, so our board reminds us that, you know, it's more than just the United States. So we'll talk a little bit about that when we advocate for the membership and the profession. You know, it's a global issue that we're working on. So the presentation, I'll talk a little bit about some other collaboration opportunities, but even to the degree with our board of directors, I think probably 2 or 3 years ago, many would be surprised that Jennifer Manila would be a member of our board. And she was one of the 4 main members that got BSides off the ground. And so now she's been on our board in her 2nd year, and she's doing a lot to advocate for the membership and for the profession at large. So there's more collaboration happening within the profession than we've seen in the past, and that's a very good thing. So relative to ISC Squared, just to touch on it, we have this big, hairy, audacious goal of trying to inspire a safe and secure cyber world. And obviously, we can't do that alone. I mean, it would be great if we thought that we could have members and everybody on the planet was an ISC Squared member, but that's probably a foolish brag. And so we understand that we have to do a lot of this through partnerships. So we'll talk briefly about that. Inspiring the safe and secure cyber world, we really take those words to heart. Words have a way of unifying people and uniting them around the common cause. I think you heard Kevin over there uniting around how we could help self-police ourselves, looking at how we have a higher bar for ethical standards, those types of things ISC Squared believes in firmly. And I think he mentioned some things relative to our code of ethics, and I think we can constantly improve that. So I'm going to take some of his words back and check into some of those statements to find out just what that is. And that's what's great about these types of events, right? We get a more casual setting, we get to share ideas, we get constructive feedback, we take that back and we try to improve. So providing credentials to our membership and to the community is a key part of what we do. So coming on down the list here, talk a little bit about some things that have changed. Most of you are pretty well aware with our CISSP and our concentrations. So that's been our most popular credential by and large. So much so that often ISC Squared as the company behind CISSP is dwarfed by the absolute popularity of CISSP. But we do have a plethora, well, not a plethora, but a group of credentials that we think, looking at information security, you have to look at it from a holistic perspective. And so the newest credential that we're going to be announcing in the April timeframe is our cloud credential, and we did that in collaboration with the Cloud Security Alliance. Now, probably 2 or 3 years ago, maybe you wouldn't have thought two organizations coming together to put that type of credential together. You might have thought of them as competitors within the industry. But you know, we respect what the Cloud Security Alliance is doing. They respected our position, and we came together to put together what we think is something that's needed in the marketplace. So again, that form of collaboration within the industry, and we'll talk about some other things that we're doing that's outside of the industry, if you will, to collaborate and advance the cause. And so when we look at these various credentials, we added a forensics credential this past year, and we also added a healthcare credential. So I think often when we get together as information security professionals, you know, the elephant in the room is that I think we all realize that some really bad things can happen. But you're reluctant to go there because people think that you're trying to lead through fear, uncertainty, and doubt. So we kind of tone that down, because everyone will get to say, well, you're just trying to drive certification, or you're trying to drive education, or you're trying to drive other things. But I think we know in our heart of hearts, you know, bad things can happen. Now, the Anthem breach that we just saw, I think, you know, 2-3 years ago, we in the profession knew that healthcare and criminal monetization of that type of information was going to be attractive. It was only a matter of time till bad people exploit that. And so while Anthem, at least we know at this point, or we surmise from it, that healthcare information wasn't compromised, I think we probably still need to look at that a little closer. We think that this market of healthcare is going to be a target of opportunity, and we're going to see increased attacks in that. And there's just, it's a much more complicated type of attack than the credit card and banking types of attacks that we have. You know, the banks come in and they pay off those transactions, and you know, and you don't have as much of your personal information that's lost, and you can recover from that. But when we start thinking about identity theft and that very critical healthcare information that insurance companies would probably love to have, I think we all want to keep that very personal and private. And so healthcare is a credential that we worked on. Forensics, we know that there are organizations that have a forensics component, and so we tried to address the market and coming up with a forensics credential to create a standard, you know, much along the lines of what Kevin is saying. We're not saying it's the only game in town, but you know, hiring officials need to have some standard to say what experiential and knowledge do people have that they're going to put on the stand, perhaps to represent a case for their company that's going to represent the forensics aspect of how they bring their case to a trial or other things of that nature. Secure software, we'll talk a little bit about that later. We're real strong advocates for that, and we've teamed with people that aren't necessarily ISC Squared members that want to amplify that message, that we need to require you know, secure software from providers, and it's a real problem for our members. It's a real problem for the profession, because when you're given software that you're constantly patching, that is porous, that you put into your infrastructure, components of your enterprise architecture, and it's highly exploited, it means a pain for you, it means a pain for your organization, and it means that we put people at risk relative to that. And then we'll talk a little bit more about the tree of life, if you will. This is our tree of life from a credential standpoint. So I just want to touch on outside of the industry. When we start at the bottom here, you know, we're looking at ways where we can collaborate with organizations to bring education into middle school and high school. We know that there's a big gap in the talent within the industry, and so if we can start to reach the young minds early on, and it goes even beyond STEM, science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. We all know within the United States, regionally here, not necessarily in Asia and other parts of the world, that STEM is a problem. We're just not attracting young folks into science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. Obviously, as ISC Squared, we're a little bit biased, and we'd like to see them moving more into the computer science, cybersecurity, that type of thing. But relative to that, we need to reach them early. So we'll talk a little bit about early on in their lives through our foundation, when we come in and we look at safe and secure online, teaching them to be safe and secure while they're on the web. and maybe reaching them and getting them intrigued with the profession itself, so that maybe down the road as they get into a middle school, high school, and if this curriculum is available, we can have an on-ramp to get them into the profession to help meet the needs of the industry and the lack of the information or the people that we need in the industry. Then we look at these specialized credentials. You saw that on the last slide, and we really look at the CISSP as kind of the capstone credential. Now, what's happened a lot within ISC Squared is most people go after the CISSP, and that's a perfectly great thing to do. But the point I just want to leave you with, we have some other very, very high quality credentials that go through the same ANSI rigor that the CISSP does, and we think that those are specialized areas that can help you look at more programmatically. When you're a CISO in an organization, or you're putting a security organization together, or you're a CIO, I mean, I've been there, I've managed massive infrastructure, international infrastructure, I've put programs in place from scratch. If you're a CIO and you've got great perimeter security, that's kind of the old, that's kind of the old moat and bridge and drawbridge and high walls around the castle. You have to assume that they're already in, and you have to assume that if they're in, what you're doing to protect your information assets. You still have to look at the perimeter, but you have to understand that today, people will burrow in, or external entities will burrow in. They'll be very patient, and so you have to look at it differently. But when you're putting a program together, if you're out there investing millions of dollars in perimeter security, those types of things, and you're not looking at application security, you're going to negate a lot of investment. So programmatically and holistically, you have to look at the type of skills that you have to have with your information security program, and it's not just a one-stop shop. It's not just the question we get, well, how many CISSPs is it going to take to secure our organization? Well, isn't that a loaded question? You can't really answer that question. It may take no CISSPs. You may have a perfectly great security program and you don't have a CISSP. We recognize that. We think that it's a good credential for someone to have, but it's even more important that if you're not going to get these credentials, that you're at least looking at these disciplines within your information security program and understanding. If you take care of healthcare, you probably need people that understand HIPAA. You probably need to understand what those penalties are going to be that your corporation may actually be taking on if you're not meeting those requirements. If you're looking at forensics aspect, if you're in law enforcement, those types of things, you might want to have somebody that has some semblance of a credential that says that they've gone through some type of training, that there's some type of test that they've passed that said if you're going to put that person on the stand to represent your case, that they have credibility. And again, of course, we talked about secure software. So just real quick, and then we'll get on to the other portion of the slides. The benefits of our membership, advocacy for the profession. I'll just briefly touch on that. We just here recently, we saw some legislation or some modifications that were proposed for the Computer Fraud and Abuse Act, and that we saw that there were changes there that might put our membership and really the industry at risk, where they were going to preclude the use of certain tools that we would use on the good side of that argument because bad folks use the same tools. That's like saying somebody who has a hammer that can break a window and break into your house, we have to preclude everyone from using hammers, right? So when we advocate for the membership, it's in a number of ways, and we're hearing that there's some legislation in Canada that we have to look at as well. So we corresponded with the White House and expressed our concerns as to how we thought that would put our membership in a bad way, that if they precluded that. And I think to Kevin's point, when you have policy wonks, and I said we need policy wonks. I mean, public policy is just hard, right? It's easy to Monday morning quarterback public policy. I spent enough time in D.C. to know that. But when you have people writing policy that don't understand the operational implications, that's a dangerous mix, and spend enough years there where Congress would come out with unfunded mandates and say, make sure you're doing this by 5 p.m. next Monday, and they have no idea that that's probably a 2 or 3 year implementation plan, and with a lot of money that they haven't funded to get that work done. So we advocate and look for the profession. Sometimes that's at the government level, sometimes that's trying to bring people together to collaborate on things. The networking opportunities within ISC Squared, we're now over 100,000 members. We look at education aspects with CPEs to keep people sharpening the saw from a COVI standpoint. You come in there and we're continuing to try to find ways to improve the quality of those CPEs, right, to make those more meaningful, make sure that we're passing that. We have an awards program, career support. We'll talk a little bit about what we're doing on behalf of our members, and discounts at certain industry events. This is something that we just launched. I mean, one of the critiques that our membership has told us over the years is that you're collecting AMFs. What are you doing for us? What benefits are we getting outside of those bullets that we have there? And we're trying to switch the conversation that says, if you view, and we know that everyone doesn't agree with this, but if you view the CISSP as a gold standard certification, we want our members to be the gold standard within the profession. So we need to give tools, we need to give opportunities for them to continue to grow and become the gold standard within the organization. So Security Central is an overarching plan that we have to start to provide tools back to our membership. And so we launched Vulnerability Central officially. We had a soft launch in December and a hard launch in January to try to give people tools where you can go through reams and reams of vulnerabilities, normalize that table, actually tailor it to the actual infrastructure that you have, so you don't have to look at all types of infrastructure and the vulnerabilities that are known, and in some cases early warnings of vulnerabilities that vendors have notified that there's something coming down the pike. So that as you're looking at it, we know that all of our members aren't sitting there with SIMs and the tools that everyone else has, right? You have, for everyone that has all the tools and the money investing in all those tools, there's another organization, and we got a member sitting there trying to secure their organization when the top of the echelon of the organization isn't investing in them, isn't investing in the tools, isn't investing in the staff. So we're trying to find ways to help that. And we're trying to also going to be working on ways where we can give templates for business cases, templates that can help our members make the case for investment within their organization so that they can get better tools, they can get better staffing, standardize or at least starting place for position descriptions, those types of things of what would take to complement their skills and put something in programmatically. A little bit of a sales pitch here. We're up for some awards at SC Magazine for cybersecurity higher education, IT security related training program, and best certification programs for both CISSP and our secure software lifecycle professional certification. So again, we're hopeful. We're really excited. We'd love to see this, if nothing else, to just bring the conversation and amplify the need for secure software. We'd love to walk away with that award. We'll see how that turns out. So finding common ground, getting into. So that's kind of my spiel about ISC squared. So hopefully I didn't bore you too much with that. So let's talk about this concept of finding common ground within the industry and beyond. So healthy signs organizations once viewed as competitors are starting to join forces. I mean, I think even when you hear Kevin's discussion this morning, those types of conversations where there's constructive dialogue and constructive feedback back and forth. I mean, these types of events I think are really healthy. Because I think you only grow as a community as you're able to hear that type of feedback, internalize it, process it, and figure out what the next steps are. There's a growing sense that the problems that we face are big enough that it doesn't have to be a one-shop stopping. So you'll notice at IC Squared, we don't tend to take shots at other people that are in this space, right? It would be incongruent with inspiring a safe and secure cyber world. So we know that EC Council is doing good work. We know ISSA, our prior executive director with IRA put out a memo that our chapters should be coming together and not at odds. We want to unify that. We want to take advantage of that type of energy that we can do by bringing those chapters together. SANS does great work. They teach our CISSP course. They do some of the work. They're a great training provider. CompTIA, ISACA, all these folks are in the mix. The problem is really big enough that there's enough space here for all of us, and we're not going to go around thumping our chest that we're the only game in town. We think we do some things really well, and we're going to continue to improve it. But collectively, you're starting to see alliances within that arena where people are coming together for the greater good. And I think you heard that in Kevin's theme, that we need to be getting about the business of doing that, or we're going to be overtaken by events. So when we look at that, the old arguments of formal education versus hands-on experience, I mean, it's all over the board. We have members of our board that don't have a college education that are fantastic within the profession, right? So we're not trying to make the argument that certification is the only answer, but we're seeing that even within the education and working with universities and colleges, that it used to be the case that, well, it's formal education, certification doesn't mean anything. And what we're starting to see is those can be complementary things as far as you go through your formal education, you go into a certification process, and then you've got your continual learning process built into that, and universities are seeing the value. The other thing is that universities are incredibly challenged to get meaningful content to market fast enough. We've all read those cases that, if you're in a technical degree program, by the time you're in the fourth year of that degree program, some of the technologies and the things you learned in the first year are probably outdated. And that's going to be an ongoing challenge as change just occurs faster and faster. So we're only going to solve that problem through meaningful partnerships. Public and private sector communications, we'll talk a little bit from that as far as critical infrastructure in a couple slides ahead. Those lines of communication need to be open. I think everything that's happening there is non-attribution. Nobody wants to put their dirty laundry out on the street about an attack. That would be very helpful to others, but we need to find ways that that would be non-attribution so people can benefit from that. We're seeing better and better communication from public to private, private to private, and public to public within the associations and cabinet agencies within our federal government and beyond. We need to spend more time uniting behind common challenges and less time finding fault with each other. You know, I mean, it's really counterproductive to what we're trying to do, and really a theme I'm trying to leave you with here today, because time really is of the essence. You know, we know that there are opportunities for very significant attacks, and we really need to come together as a community. So, common ground, we need to partner together in order to successfully prepare for tomorrow's workforce. We talked a little bit about that, reaching our young as early as possible, and really trying to reach out to underrepresented groups within our profession. Women make up 11% of the profession, and we should be reaching out to our daughters, our nieces, and encouraging them. Minorities make up a small percentage of the profession. We need to be encouraging them and working with educators to try to get them represented within the community, because all of these wells of talent to draw from can help us actually bridge the gap of, you know, this not having enough talented people within the industry and maybe starting to close on that. So, trying to identify what the right skills mix and education mix is to educate these folks, and working together to build the right partnerships for education to bridge organizational talent needs, so that we can put the workforce together that organizations need today and plan for tomorrow as well. So we've seen some of the recent attacks. We know that these attacks are on the rise. And we know that now with healthcare coming into the mix, that I'm sure that there's a scramble within the healthcare community to start to try to, you know, look at things more closely. I don't know about you, but when I walk into a doctor's office and I just see how physical records are handled and, you know, just left out in the open, and, you know, you're logging in to sign in that you came to the dentist's office or the doctor, and you just see records strewn about and they're not physically protected. That there's a mentality that that information isn't necessarily important. It doesn't make them bad people. It just, you know, healthcare has been a very open, it's almost like research. They share information. Somebody calls from the hospital, you know, at the emergency room to the doctor's office, and they ask for some information on a patient. People think that a life might be at stake, and so that information is often, you know, actually shared without any idea of who's on the other side. I mean, the healthcare industry is so ripe for phishing. It's almost, you know, how do you actually even just, you know, start to stem the tide with that? And all those physical records at some point are going to need to be digitized. I mean, it may be years and years before they're all digitized. So raising awareness of how we actually protect our healthcare information, I think, is vitally important. And I think we're going to see more focus on it as people become more concerned about the breaches that we're seeing and the opportunity to monetize that type of information. So we talk about the Internet of Things. You know, that's all the rage, and the Internet of everything. So in this space, you know, ISC Squared has partnered with a number of folks, and we'll talk about that with our Application Security Council. But Josh Corman with the Calvary is on our Application Security Advisory Council. And do I expect Josh is ever going to be a member of ISC Squared? Probably not. But when Josh and I talk about it, he goes, I want to amplify the message that we need to have better application security. And, you know, I'll team with ISC Squared to that end. And it's not about Josh necessarily becoming a member. It's about organizations coming together to amplify an important message. So that's another one where you're seeing partnerships and people coming to the table to collaborate on things that you might not have otherwise seen them do just a few short years ago. Now, of course, when we start to see the Internet of Things and we see that as convenience of technology takes place, attack vectors and opportunities for exploitation go up. It's always been that way. It's always been, you know, secure, accessible. So if you work in the DoD space and you know SIPRNet and you're working in classified systems, you know that those are air gapped. You know the whole process that goes between that. You know that we've had arguments where we go to court whether things are air gapped or whether they're logical security, and how well logical security actually meets the need of certain classification levels. When you start to think of the things that are embedded within our lives, whether it's insulin pumps, these types of things, and all these things have a potential to be compromised in our cars and automobiles, it starts to be getting really personal. We start to look at this as life-limiting property, not just at the corporate level, but in our personal lives. And so we look at these types of things, and we try to collaborate with organizations to try to get our arms around it and try to do some positive things within this problem domain. But when you look at this and you consider, well, let me just touch base on this. So here's our Applications Security Advisory Council, and these are abbreviated versions of these folks. Most of them all have long resumes. But some of these folks are members, and some of these folks are people within industry that are not ISC squared members. They'll never likely be ISC squared members, but they're advocating for secure software. We should all be advocating for secure software. So it's not about a membership, it's not about one organization, it's about a community saying we need to demand a higher degree of security from people that are developing code, whether it's in-house or people that you're acquiring software from. We need to have a higher standard. We need to demand that higher standard. And we're open to have other folks that are interested in collaborating with us on this, and you can learn more about it at our website. Now, when we look at the Internet of Things and we look at the Internet of Everything, and we look at critical infrastructure, critical infrastructure sectors are now starting to learn. I mean, of course, the financial sector has a lot of experience because money always draws corruption and crime. So they've been a target from the get-go. But now we're starting to see that, either through natural disaster or those types of things, that these sectors are starting to communicate more together. They're starting to collaborate more together because they know that they rely on each other. If you look at the energy sector within the United States, for example, if you realize that 90% of the infrastructure of our energy sector is privately owned. So you may think that the government owns the grid, but the majority of the grid and the majority of the energy sector infrastructure is privately owned. So how do we get our arms around that? How are we going to encourage, private organizations to invest? We've all heard about the grid and the growing number of populations and how it's overtaxed, and at some point, if it's not reinvested in and the amount of money that's going to take to bring it forward, there's some significant hurdles there. But when we start to think about the Internet of Things and the Internet of everything else, and now critical infrastructure, and embedded SCADA and industrial control systems, things that in DoD we dealt with for years. Embedded systems within missile and defense systems is old hat to the Department of Defense. But now we're starting to see it embedded into our way of life, and actually in the delivery of common services. And so we need to start to take a very, very holistic view of that, and we need to be bringing people together in these sectors, opening up the lines of communication. And there's a whole opportunity here of not just within the industry of building a common ground, but with these sectors and reaching out to them, because in all of these areas you have IT folks, you have people that are working trying to secure the critical infrastructure. And much like Kevin was talking, next door earlier, we need to have some common goals and objectives that we're trying to achieve, because if you look at the basic weakest link aspect of it, any weak link within our critical infrastructure can have pivot points, jump-off points for other types of attacks. And so there's a great deal of opportunity for collaboration within the critical infrastructure sectors. We're starting to see that start to develop in the form of communicating, but there's so much more work there to be done. Outside of the industry as well, within the academic organization, we have our global academic program where we're bringing universities in that are trying to springboard their cybersecurity programs. So in some cases they license our content in some cases we help them develop content, in some cases they're actually teaching our content as a part of the curriculum, and in some cases they're having our certification as kind of the next step at graduation point that they funnel their folks into so that they know that they have that continual learning aspect of it. We're not the only game in town to do this, but this is another part of building a common ground outside of the industry within the academic organizations to try to address the need that we need to educate folks. We need to try to feed the pipeline, the demand within the industry for talented folks. And so we just started year 2 of this program, and we've got a number of organizations, including USF, on board. USF is actually using faculty members to teach our CSSP and other credentials, and so it's a great partnership we have there, and we want to continue to develop that. We're working with local organizations here and other states to develop middle school and high school curriculum to try to advance, reaching those folks, reaching the young earlier on, and funnel them into what we hope to be a career in cybersecurity. We have our foundation, so we're not-for-profit, so we have a C6, which is where we're keenly focused on giving back to our membership. Our foundation is where we try to meet our social responsibilities. It's where we try to reach out to, and we have 3 specific areas there. We have our safe and secure online area, and that's where our volunteers, we have over 1,400 members that volunteer their time to go into classrooms, to go into churches, to go all over the place to come in to educate teachers, parents, students on how they can be safe and secure online. We see that the children are extremely vulnerable. I mean, when I grew up and you locked the front door and, you did the bed check, and, my parents felt pretty comfortable that everybody's safe. Now with this ubiquitous nature of technology, kids are on mobile devices 24/7 by 365, and there's predatory activity there. They need to be educated how they can do it. The statistics of kids that are approached by somebody that they've met online that they don't know in person without a parent is staggering. These are scary numbers that, that these predatory activities with kids are very concerning, so we're trying to reach that. Our foundation also looks at research, so we do research to try to help industry understand what's happening within the profession. We have our annual Global Information Security Workforce Study, and that study this year will be due out in late April, so that'll be out there on our website for people to consume and look at what's happening and what has happened between last year and this. And then again, to expand what we're doing within our foundation relative to looking at those vulnerable on the web, we're launching our seniors safe and secure online to go in and help. I mean, my father's 93 years old. I think he's probably reached the end of the internet a couple times. He consumes everything on the web, and then I'll always see that he has like the Windows 7 registry unleashed, and I'm going, Dad, what are you screwing around with that stuff at 93 years of age? But our seniors, some of them are savvy, and some of them just think they click on everything that comes in an email, or they're approached by not just, we see the type of telemarketing and phone calls that can actually exploit seniors, but the web can be a lot more creative, right? And it can create opportunities for, these are our parents, these are our grandparents. We have a responsibility to look at them as being the potential to be highly exploited, so we want to raise awareness relative to that through our safe and secure online, targeted specifically to seniors. So if you're interested in what's going on with IC Squared, our main website is there, our Facebook, you can follow us on Twitter and LinkedIn. I just want to close with the fact that there's great opportunity within the industry and beyond to collaborate. A lot of that is starting to happen. You play an active role in that here. BSides is a great opportunity where people come in, and not everybody's walking in as an IC Squared member. I'm not saying that everyone walks out needs to be, but stay involved. You can approach us and reach out to us to maybe get involved, and we're not going to try to hard sell you on membership, but you may have some really great ideas, or you may have an organization, or your company might be doing something really, really innovative that would help advance the cause. And so it's not just about one organization. We have to come together as a community, and so that was a theme that I hope I would leave you with, and I'll open it up to questions. Yes, sir.
Hey, David, you mentioned a little bit of the dichotomy between certification and academia, and specifically, for example, on the gentleman outside, one of the colleges, like a case where he says, yeah, you have a PhD. No, but I'm doing this 30 years. It doesn't matter. So there's a little bit of, and I guess arrogance is the wrong word, but parochialism is maybe a better word in the academic community that looks at it and say, well, this is the credential you need to be credible here. However, as we understand out there, for those of us who operate in the real world, hands-on certifications and other types of programs tend to be even more meaningful. What can we do to bridge that gap so that not only the industry understands it, but people coming up into the career and the profession understand that there's a meaningful relationship, not a competitive relationship, between the formal education and the more practical.
What a great question. I don't think I've ever met you, but I mean, this was what I was starting to try to attempt the conversation with here today. And so when you look at even within the credentialing bodies, and we mentioned SANS, and we mentioned that IC Squared looks at a holistic approach to the information security, you still need to deep dive hands-on. You know, we're not professing that one thing solves the whole thing. You have specialized proprietary types of technologies that are going to be within your enterprise architecture, and so you're still going to need people that know checkpoint firewalls, Cisco fire. I'm sorry I even mentioned it because I won't get all the vendors, and someone will feel like I've glossed over them. But you know what I'm saying? There's always going to be that deep dive to understand this component within your enterprise architecture. So it really is starting to have the conversation that it's not just one thing; it's a collective thing. And you're right. I mean, I really wanted to try to approach this group today to say that ISC Square, we're not trying to come from a sense of arrogance. We still have a lot of things to improve upon. We have content to improve upon. We've got to improve upon the services that we give back to our membership. But we're in the fight, if you will. We're fighting to break down barriers and bring people together that wouldn't otherwise be at the table trying to work on this. And we're working with academic organizations. And surprisingly, I see a lot of change there. I see a lot of receptivity to blending things and trying to get to the end game of educating people that maybe 2 or 3 years ago weren't there. I mean, 2 or 3 years ago, there was a lot of discussion, well, if you don't have a formal education, you're not worth your salt. Or if you don't have a certification, you're not worth your salt. Well, how can you make those generalized statements? There are plenty of people that don't have a formal degree within the industry that are doing great work. There are plenty of people that are in the industry very qualified. They're doing really bad things too. To Kevin's point about the ethical aspect of it. So I think it's to answer your question, I think it's starting to have this dialogue here where you come into the conversation with the sense of humility that what we're trying to do is bigger than self. It's bigger than an organization, and that we got to try to get people to the table to work in complementary ways towards making meaningful change to inspire a safe and secure cyber world. I mean, anyone that's in that space, anyone that fits within those words, we're interested in working with and collaborating with.
And my guess is academia is not going to reach out to you. It's incumbent upon ISC Squared to reach across.
Well, to academia's credit, they are reaching out. Now, we've only had our global academic program in place for a year, just over a year. And there were some universities up there that you saw. That list needs to be a lot longer. And so I think as people understand what we're trying to accomplish there, and they say that, you know, everyone's looking, well, what's their goal? What's their agenda? What's the IC Squared agenda? And when they see what we're trying to accomplish, the barriers and the guards kind of come down, and then we get academics talking to academics. Dr. Ray Hayward, who runs our education department, is an academic. You know, she can talk to academics about what we're trying to accomplish from an education standpoint about raising the bar for people that way. And I think that when you're talking in the same language, I think that's breaking down some barriers. But we'll see. Only time's going to tell. But I'm telling you, we're seeing a tipping point where people are coming together in ways that we hadn't seen just a few short years ago. But excellent question. Other questions?
Yeah, I just have an academic question. Any plans on that collaboration, setting up some type of meeting with Coursera or edX or something like that?
I'm sorry, I missed.
Massively open online classes?
Like live online classes?
Yeah, like Coursera, like edX.
We are doing live online classes for our certifications, and we're looking at that for CPE opportunities for our members, and maybe there would be opportunity to kind of meet that if you're a non-member type of education type of thing. So the technology we have is there. Now I think it's the content we have to develop, if I'm following your question. And I'll give you a business card, and maybe we can just have an email and make sure I'm understanding the question and try to answer it more thoroughly. Other questions? Anyone have any thoughts relative to, you know, healthcare and you know, that sector and the recent breach and what it might mean within the industry, or any other thoughts that you may have? Brian? Well, we're doing, our board is an international board, so they remind us there's more than just Clearwater, Florida in the United States. And so our chapters continue to grow, overseas, just like they are here, and they're helping us take our word out there. And so we're working on that. We're looking at translation and content where we can actually do better localization. We've pushed a lot of our operations out, decentralized it out to our regional offices in the EMEA office and our APAC office, giving those local staffs the opportunity to look at localization issues that are going to help those markets, understand the idiosyncrasies of both language and how people learn. I mean, it's very, very different. Like when you look at the United States and you look at the challenges we have with STEM, that's not the same challenge in Asia. And so in each different region, there are idiosyncrasies relative to how you advance the cause of inspiring a safe and secure cyber world. So Asia, STEM there's a lot of interest in computer science and technology, engineering, and mathematics. United States, we have a different problem. EMEA, it's a little different. And now we're working in Latin America. We've opened an office in Latin America to try to work in that office, in that region as well. So it's trying to take these credentials and trying to take the concept of a holistic approach to information security and cyber and take that message. And we're seeing growth in those regions. Those markets are still, they're really just starting to take off. But there's a lot of geopolitical and geo-business aspect that's driving all this, right? Businesses want to operate across the boundaries that are physical boundaries that governments want to have more control over. And that's a tension that's within the industry that we need to figure out how we play in that space, because it affects our members. Because you're torn about all over the place. You have people that want to open up the type of business lines. Your CEO wants to have business lines open and transparent, across country lines. And then those countries want to have different barriers for what you're doing. And so there's a lot of idiosyncrasies in the global economy, and I think those are going to continue to test us as a community. Other questions? I think I've run over. So I appreciate your time and attention, and enjoy the rest. There's some great speakers and on the agenda for today. Enjoy the rest of the day, and thanks for coming. Yeah.
Good morning. Got some quick announcements to make. There is a change to the schedule for track 3. Mr. Guy Hagan will not be here. It'll be Andrew Crenshaw who'll be doing lockpicking.